My name is Madison, and I was always the person who played by the rules. For 17 years, every double shift I picked up, every vacation I postponed, every pair of nursing shoes I wore down to the sole, it all funneled into a single purpose: a college fund for my daughter, Ava. The balance was $212,000. That number wasn't just money, it was my secret monument, a testament to the fact that I, a single mother, had managed to build a fortress for my child's future. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, I logged into my banking app and the world simply fell away. The joint savings account, the one I had so foolishly kept linked with my mother for safekeeping since I was barely out of my teens, showed a balance of zero, just a single brutal transaction, a withdrawal of $212,000, authorized by the other user on the account. The name listed was hers, my own mother, Brenda. The drive to her house was a blur. My hands were shaking so badly on the steering wheel that the whole car seemed to vibrate with my rage and disbelief. I kept replaying a 17-year montage of sacrifices: missed school plays for overtime, budget meals so we could save an extra $50, the constant grinding exhaustion. When I finally stood in her living room, my voice came out low and unnervingly calm. "Where is Ava's college fund?" I asked. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She actually let out a small, airy laugh. "Thanks for funding your sister's wedding," she said, as if she were telling a clever joke, as if she hadn't just taken a match to my daughter's entire future. Then, as an afterthought, she added with a casual wave of her hand, "And no, Madison, you're not invited. It's going to be a small, intimate family event. You get it, right?" I felt a smile stretch across my face, a horrifying, tight-lipped thing that felt like it might shatter my teeth. "Sure," I whispered, the sound barely audible. "I understand perfectly." A few moments later, as I walked back toward my car in a daze, my phone buzzed. My dad's name, Robert, was on the screen. The moment I answered, the only thing I could hear was the sound of his voice. Completely broken. He was sobbing. And in that instant, I knew this was so much more than just stolen money. This was about a web of secrets and lies my family had been spinning for decades. Stick around to the end of this story, and make sure you follow and subscribe, because the revenge I started planning in that moment was going to unearth every single secret my mother thought she had buried for good. I sat in my car, parked right in front of my mother's pristine suburban house, just staring at nothing as my father's choked sobs echoed through the phone. I'd never heard him sound like this, so utterly defeated. "Madison, I had no idea she would actually go through with it," he managed to get out between ragged breaths. "She told me she was just reallocating some family finances for a bit, but I never ever thought she meant your savings, sweetheart." I squeezed the phone, pressing it hard against my ear. A sharp pain shot through my jaw from how tightly I was clenching it. "Dad, that was my daughter's future. Every single cent I put into that account was for Ava. You knew that. We all knew that." A heavy silence hung on the line, punctuated only by his unsteady breathing. "Your mother said the account was still joint," he finally murmured, his voice sounding so small and distant. "She insisted you weren't using it yet, that we could help Kayla have her dream wedding and then we'd sort it out down the line. I thought she meant she would pay it back." The words felt like a physical blow, twisting something deep inside my gut. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated, premeditated heist. "Dad, did you approve this? Did you sign off on it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Another pause, longer this time. "I didn't sign a thing," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Your mother took care of it. She always takes care of everything. I should have asked more questions. I am so sorry, Madison." I closed my eyes, letting my head fall back against the headrest. The memory was so vivid. My mother taking me to the bank right after Ava was born when I was 19, exhausted and terrified. "We'll put my name on the account too," she'd said with a reassuring smile. just in case. If anything ever happens to you, I can make sure the money is safe for Ava. I was so young and so grateful for the help. It never once occurred to me that the person I was trusting to protect that money would be the very one I needed protection from. Growing up, money was the center of my mother's universe. It was her one true religion. She'd come from nothing and never let us forget the battles she'd fought for every scrap. But somewhere on her journey from poverty to comfort, that healthy fear had curdled into a toxic obsession with control. For her, money wasn't about security, it was about power. She was the gatekeeper who decided who was worthy of help and who was left to struggle. I had lost count of the times I'd watched her rescue my younger sister, Kayla. Maxed out credit cards, late rent payments, a new car when the old one broke down. It was always the same. Kayla just needs a little leg up, she'd say. She's the baby of the family. But for me, there were only lectures. Lectures about responsibility, about self-sufficiency, about standing on my own 2 feet. And I did. I stood until my feet bled. I worked graveyard shifts as a nurse and then picked up morning shifts at a diner when Ava was little. While my mother was finding deals on designer handbags, I was at my kitchen table with a calculator, trying to figure out if I could afford both new textbooks and a proper grocery run in the same week. So, when I processed the fact that she had exploited a loophole she herself had created, draining nearly $250,000 from my daughter's future to pour it into a lavish wedding I was explicitly banned from attending, something deep within me didn't just break. It hardened into steel. "Dad," I said, my voice slow and deliberate, "did you have any idea she wasn't going to invite me or Ava?" His silence was the only answer I needed. Finally, a choked whisper came through. "She said it would be awkward, that you'd make it all about you." He paused. "But stealing the money, Madison, that's just too far, too far." As if there had been some imaginary line of decency she'd respected up until this point. "I'm gonna fix this," I told him, a strange calm settling over me. "I don't know how I'm gonna do it yet, but I am not letting her get away with this. Not this time." After we hung up, I remained in that driveway for what felt like an eternity. I watched the lace curtains in her front window twitch. She was watching me, I knew it, trying to assess the damage, trying to figure out if I was a threat that needed to be managed or just another problem she could sweep under the rug. For the very first time, I looked back at the entire timeline of my life and saw the pattern so clearly it made me sick. Every time I had built something for myself, every small success, she had found a way to either take the credit, seize control, or tear it down completely. Not this time. Ava was 17. She had wept with pure, unadulterated joy when I showed her the projected college costs, and she realized that her dream school was actually within our grasp. How could I possibly look into her eyes and tell her that her own grandmother had just gambled her entire future on floral arrangements, a catering bill, and a fancy white dress? That night, sleep was a foreign concept. I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, a legal pad beside me. I began to write down everything, every single detail I could remember about that account, the dates, the deposits, the statements I had saved. I kept underlining one fact, again and again. The account was created for Ava's education. I had the paper trail, I had the emails. My mother might have the cash right now, but I had something she had completely underestimated, evidence. And for the first time in my life, I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like a woman preparing for war. If you were in my shoes, would you try to confront your mother again, or would you go straight to a lawyer? The next morning was a blur. I went to the hospital and moved through my shift like a robot, my body performing the familiar tasks of a nurse, while my mind was a chaotic storm, replaying every condescending conversation I'd ever had with my mother about family duty. Between checking on patients, I'd find myself staring at the wall, my mind churning, counting down the hours until I could talk to the one person who had never, not once, made me feel like I was less than. Nathan. Nathan wasn't Ava's biological father. But he had walked into our lives a few years ago and fit so perfectly, it felt like he had always been there. He knew all about the joint account. He knew how meticulously I'd saved. When he came into my kitchen that evening, his arms full of takeout bags and his face etched with concern, I didn't even try to be strong. The dam broke. I told him everything. My mother's chilling little laugh, her dismissive line about funding Kayla's wedding, my father's pathetic, tear-soaked phone call. Nathan just sat and listened, his hands clasped on the table, his expression growing harder with every word I spoke. When I finally ran out of steam, he let out a long, slow breath. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "This is catastrophic, but it's not the end." I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "She took it all, Nathan. How is that not the end?" He leaned forward, tapping a finger on the table for emphasis. "Because you're not an idiot, Madison. You didn't just stuff cash into a shoebox under her bed. You have records. You have a mountain of proof that this money was intended for one thing and one thing only: Ava's education. That's what matters." He was right. From the very beginning, I had saved every statement, every email confirming a transfer into that account. At the time, it was just my obsessive way of tracking my progress. Now, it was an arsenal. "Step 1, Nathan said, his voice taking on a tactical edge. "We gather and organize every single piece of documentation you have. Step 2, we go to the bank and file a formal complaint. Step 3, we find a lawyer." Today. I blinked at him, the fog in my brain starting to clear. "A lawyer? You really think this is a legal matter?" He gave me a look that was both gentle and utterly serious. "Madison, she took $212,000 from a joint account that you can prove you funded almost exclusively. You have documented its purpose for nearly 2 decades. She then used that money, without your knowledge or consent, to bankroll someone else's wedding. At the absolute minimum, that is a massive civil issue. At worst for her, it's fraud." The word hung in the air between us. Fraud. My mother, a woman who prided herself on her sterling reputation, her position in her church, her standing in the community, the thought of her being investigated for fraud sent a small, dark thrill of satisfaction through me. I couldn't deny it. Still, a part of me, the part that had been conditioned for over 30 years, hesitated. "She's my mother," I whispered. "Do I really want to see her in a courtroom?" Nathan's expression softened, but his tone didn't waver. "She stopped being just your mother the second she decided to steal from your child. If you don't draw a hard line right here, right now, what do you think she'll feel entitled to take from you next?" That night, we transformed my dining room table into a war room. We spread out 17 years of my life in paper form, bank statements from when Ava was still in diapers, handwritten notes in the margins, overtime shift, Christmas bonus, tax refund. Every single dollar had a story, a sacrifice attached to it. And now, every single one of those stories ended with the image of my mother's smirking face, thanking me for footing the bill for a party I wasn't even allowed to attend. I pulled up the online banking portal again, my stomach twisting into a familiar knot. I looked at the transaction details. The withdrawal was processed in person at the branch right near her house, the one where all the tellers knew her by her first name. She probably strolled in there, all smiles and charm, spinning some believable tale about helping her poor, single mom daughter manage her finances. The thought made me physically ill. "Do you think she did this on her own?" I asked Nathan. "Or do you think Kayla and Justin know where the money really came from?" He thought for a moment. "My bet is that Kayla knows the money is from you, but your mom spun it as Madison is contributing to the wedding. It's the least she can do for family. As for Justin, if he's an investment banker like you said, he's not stupid. If he's involved in the wedding finances, he probably knows more than he's letting on." I swallowed hard. So I'm potentially up against my own mother and my future brother-in-law who literally works in finance, I muttered. Fantastic. Or, Nathan countered, his eyes meeting mine, you're up against two people who are banking on you being too weak and too sentimental to fight back, and that's the mistake they're going to regret. Before I went to bed, I sent a text to my dad. Dad, I need you to tell me every single thing Mom said about that account. Every word, every phrase. This is getting serious. His reply came back almost instantly. Whatever you need to do, Madison, I'll support you this time. The words stung, a painful reminder of all the times he hadn't, all the times he had chosen to look the other way because it was easier than confronting the woman he shared a house with. But I clung to that fragile promise. I was going to need every ally I could get, even the flawed ones. As I lay in bed later, watching Ava sleep peacefully, her face untroubled in the soft glow of her nightlight, a different kind of anger began to crystallize in my veins. It wasn't the hot, frantic rage of that first day. This was something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. It was calculated. My mother thought she had already won. She thought I'd throw a fit, cry, and then eventually just let it go, because family is more important than money. She had absolutely no idea that this time I was going to make damn sure her actions had consequences she couldn't charm, manipulate, or bully her way out of. If someone you loved stole everything you had built for your child, would you still be worried about protecting their reputation? 2 days later, I took a personal day from the hospital. I walked into the very bank that had held my daughter's future hostage for 17 years. Nathan came with me, a quiet, solid presence at my side. The branch lobby had that generic, sterile smell of money and corporate air freshener, but to me it felt suffocating. When we were shown into the branch manager's office, I placed my neatly organized folder on his polished desk. This joint account was opened 17 years ago. I began, my voice clear and even, in my name and my mother's name, Brenda. It was established for a single documented purpose, to fund my daughter's college education. I am the primary contributor of nearly all the funds in this account. I slid a highlighted statement across his desk showing the final balance just before the withdrawal. Last week, my mother withdrew the entire amount, $212,000, without my knowledge or consent. The manager, a man named Mr. Miller, adjusted his glasses and scanned the documents. Legally, he started, in that careful, rehearsed tone, with a joint account, both parties have full and equal rights to withdraw any and all funds. I nodded, my expression unreadable. I had expected that. I understand the bank's policy, I replied, but I want it formally noted in your records that this withdrawal was made against the explicit intent and understanding of the account's primary funder. I need a full report on that transaction. Who approved it? What form of identification was used? What was said at the time of the withdrawal? He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. He typed for a few minutes, his brow furrowed. Finally, he printed a report and handed it to me. The withdrawal was processed in person by Brenda, he confirmed. She presented her valid driver's license and signed the withdrawal slip. From our perspective, it was a legitimate transaction. Of course it was. My mother was a master at playing just inside the lines to get what she wanted. Can you provide a notarized statement confirming these details? I asked. That she withdrew the funds from this joint account, primarily funded by me on that date. Mr. Miller glanced from my determined face to Nathan's silent, imposing figure, and then nodded. Yes, I can do that. As he worked on the document, Nathan gave my hand a quick squeeze under the table. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a start. It was a formal piece of the narrative. That afternoon, we met with a lawyer, a woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been recommended by one of Nathan's colleagues. She had a calm, piercing gaze that told me she had navigated the ugliest of family disputes. After I told her the whole story and she meticulously reviewed my folder of evidence, she leaned back in her leather chair. Legally, your mother had the right to access the money in the account, she stated flatly. My heart plummeted. She held up a hand before I could speak. But that is far from the end of the story. The key to this case isn't about access. It's about intent and unjust enrichment. You have a mountain of documentation, emails, personal notes, statements, where you consistently refer to this as Ava's college fund. You can prove you were the sole contributor for nearly 2 decades. If we can demonstrate that your mother knowingly misrepresented her reasons for accessing those funds and used them for her own benefit in a way that directly harmed her granddaughter, you have a very strong civil case. Civil? Not criminal? I asked, the word fraud still echoing in my head. Ms. Rodriguez tapped a pen on her desk. For now, it presents as a civil matter. We would be seeking restitution, getting the money back, and potentially punitive damages. However, she added, her eyes sharpening, if we uncover any evidence that she lied to bank personnel, forged any documents, or conspired with another party, say your sister's fiancé, to conceal the origins of the wedding funds, then it could certainly cross over into criminal territory. But that would be a matter for the district attorney to decide. The thought of my mother in handcuffs was a strange, bitter pill. I didn't know if I wanted that. I just wanted Ava's future back. What about the wedding? I asked. It's in a few weeks. She's already spent the money. Ms. Rodriguez's lips curved into a slight, predatory smile. Good, she said. That gives us a direct target. If we can prove that wedding vendors were paid directly from those stolen funds, we establish an undeniable link between your savings and their celebration. Judges have very little patience for people who spend stolen money on extravagant luxuries. On the drive home, Nathan and I were quiet, both processing. Finally, he spoke. You know, if Justin is handling the finances for this wedding, we might not have to guess about those payments. We might be able to get our hands on invoices, wire transfers, maybe even emails that tie him and your mom together. How? I asked. He'd never give us anything. Nathan shrugged, not willingly. But vendors talk. And what about your dad? He might know more than he thinks he does. That evening, I called my dad again. This time, my questions were like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and pointed. When did Mom start talking about paying for the wedding? Did she ever mention specific amounts? Did she ever explicitly state where the money was coming from? He hesitated several times, the conflict in his voice palpable. She kept saying the account was just sitting there, dormant, he finally admitted, his voice low with shame. She said, Madison is too practical to mind helping out her sister. She kept repeating that you'd figure something out for Ava, that you always do. A hot, burning rage filled my chest. My mother had taken my greatest strength, my resilience, my reliability, and twisted it into a weapon to use against me. She was counting on me to be the responsible one who would clean up her mess. After I hung up, I went to Ava's room. She was at her desk, scrolling through college websites. I leaned against the doorframe, the words I had to say feeling like stones in my throat. Hey, sweetie, I said softly. Can we talk for a minute? She turned, her face lighting up. Oh, hey, did you see the financial aid pre-approval for state? I was just looking at the dorm layouts. They're so small, but kind of cool. The words caught in my throat. I walked over and sat on the edge of her bed. Ava, something's happened. Something with your college fund. I told her everything. Every single ugly, humiliating detail. Her face cycled through a storm of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and finally a pale, stricken horror. Grandma took it? She whispered. All of it? I could only nod, feeling my own eyes begin to sting. I'm fighting to get it back, I said, my voice thick. I've talked to the bank. I have a lawyer. Grandpa is on our side. I am not giving up, but I couldn't let you keep dreaming about campuses and dorm rooms without knowing what we're facing. Tears began to slide down her cheeks, but she didn't wail or scream. She just looked at me with a shattered expression and said in a small, shaky voice, I always knew she loved Aunt Kayla more. I I didn't think she would sell my future for a party. That one sentence did more damage to my soul than anything my mother had ever done. That night, Ava fell asleep with her laptop still open to a picture of the ivy-covered library on her dream campus. I gently closed it and went back to the dining room table where my arsenal of documents lay. My mother had made her choice. Now I was going to make mine. If you were Ava, could you ever trust your grandmother again after a betrayal like that? The weeks leading up to Kayla's wedding were like living in a pressure cooker. It felt like the entire world was celebrating. My social media feeds, extended family group chats, even casual conversations at the grocery store. It was all about the big day. I saw pictures of floral mock-ups, sneak peeks of the lakeside venue, and blurry photos of Kayla's dress fitting. It all floated through my digital life like a storm of cruel confetti. I muted the group chats and unfollowed half of my family, but the wedding still found ways to seep into my life like smoke under a door. My mother, Brenda, never called. Neither did Kayla. The wall of silence from their side of the family was more deafening than any argument could have been. My dad, on the other hand, started calling more frequently. Sometimes it was just to ask about Ava, his voice heavy with a guilt he couldn't hide. Other times he would awkwardly inquire about how things were going with that lawyer. One evening, he let something slip that made my blood run cold. "Your mother was on the phone with your Aunt Susan," he said quietly. She was bragging. She said something like, "At least the wedding is completely paid for. My girls might not always show their gratitude, but they'll thank me one day for this." I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. Did she say how it was paid for? He let out a long, weary sigh. She told Susan that Madison's savings were just sitting there gathering dust. Better to put them to use for something beautiful. Something beautiful. My daughter's entire educational future boiled down to table centerpieces and an open bar. Guided by Miss Rodriguez, we focused on building an unbreakable chain of evidence linking the stolen funds to the wedding. Nathan helped me create a detailed spreadsheet, tracking every major payment my mother had made in the months since she'd drained my account. The pattern was undeniable. Large wire transfers to wedding vendors, often occurring just a day or two after my paychecks had been deposited. When Ms. Rodriguez saw the spreadsheet, her eyebrows shot up. "Patterns are a judge's best friend," she said with a grim smile, "and they especially love a clear timeline. This is excellent." We also began a quiet, careful campaign of information gathering. I would call vendors, posing as a family member helping out with the finances, and ask for duplicate invoices for my records. It was astonishing how quickly people would send you sensitive financial documents if you sounded stressed, polite, and slightly overwhelmed. One of the florists even forwarded me an entire email chain between my mother and Kayla. In it, my mother had written, clear as day, "Don't you worry about the cost, darling. Your sister's college stash is finally being put to good use for something fun." That email became our Exhibit A. At home, the atmosphere grew heavy. Ava became quieter, more withdrawn. She kept her grades up and went to her part-time job at the bookstore, but she avoided any and all talk about her future. One evening, I found her in her room, methodically deleting college recruitment emails from her inbox without even opening them. "Hey," I said softly from her doorway, "what are you doing?" She just shrugged, not looking at me. "What's the point, Mom? We can't afford any of it. I'll just go to community college for a couple of years and see what happens." My heart twisted in my chest. "Ava, we are fighting this. And even if the absolute worst happens and we don't get every penny back, you are not surrendering your dreams because your grandmother decided to be selfish." She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "But what if we lose?" she whispered. "What if she gets away with it, and I'm the one who ends up paying the price for the rest of my life?" I didn't have a simple, comforting answer for that, so I gave her the only truth I had. If we lose, you will still have me. You'll have Nathan. You'll have your own incredible strength. We will find another way, but if we don't even fight, then she automatically wins. And I refuse to teach you that it's okay for people to steal from you just because they happen to share your blood. Around that time, the whispers in the family started to get louder. Madison is making a big fuss about money, one of my aunts texted me, followed by a shocked face emoji. Are you really trying to sue your own mother? I replied immediately. It's true. She stole my daughter's college fund to pay for a wedding. I'm trying to get it back. She never wrote back, but my cousin did. Good for you, his message read. Someone should have stood up to her 20 years ago. The embossed wedding invitation, of course, never arrived for me or for Ava. We were officially ghosts, uninvited and erased from the narrative. But I had absolutely no intention of staying home. Not because I wanted to cause a scene or ruin a party, but because that wedding reception was the one place where every single player in this drama would be gathered in the same room. My mother, my sister, Justin, and all the extended family who had benefited from or enabled my mother's behavior for years. I kept my plan quiet, telling only Nathan, Ms. Rodriguez, and finally, my dad. When I told him I was going to the wedding to confront my mother with the evidence, his initial reaction was pure panic. Madison, you can't. You'll cause a scene. You'll humiliate the whole family. She already humiliated me, I replied, my voice steady. She humiliated Ava. The only difference is that when I speak up, I'll be telling the truth. He was silent for a long time. Then, in a defeated, tired voice, he asked, "What do you need from me?" "The truth," I said. "And when the time comes, I need you not to stand in my way." Not this time. As the wedding day approached, the anxious flutter in my stomach was at war with the cold, hard resolve in my chest. I printed out every document Ms. Rodriguez had advised, the bank statements, screenshots of the account history, the highlighted vendor invoices, and, of course, that damning email about my college stash being used for something fun. I put them all in a crisp manila folder and slipped it into my handbag. On the morning of the wedding, I put on a simple, elegant navy dress. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be misconstrued as jealous or attention-seeking. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. I wasn't the scared little girl begging for a scrap of her mother's approval anymore. I was a mother about to walk into a room full of people who thought they knew the story, and I was going to show them the real one. If your entire family was gathered to celebrate, using your child's future as the fuel for their party, would you walk away quietly, or would you walk in with the truth? The venue was breathtaking, a perfect fantasy ripped from the pages of a bridal magazine. Rows of white chairs faced a sparkling lake. Fairy lights were woven through the branches of ancient oak trees, and flowers seemed to cascade from every conceivable surface. It was the kind of wedding designed for Instagram, meant to be envied for weeks. As Nathan and I walked up the manicured stone path, I could feel the stares. We were the ghosts at the feast. We weren't supposed to be there, and that was precisely why I had come. My dad intercepted us near the entrance. His tie was slightly askew, and his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. "Madison." "You look beautiful," he said, his voice raspy. "Thank you for coming." "You might not be saying that in a couple of hours," I replied, offering a small, humorless smile. He swallowed hard. "I'll tell the truth if I'm asked directly," he promised, his voice low. "I owe you that much." The ceremony itself was a surreal blur. I stood at the back, watching Kayla glide down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my car. Her face radiant, as if she had never encountered a single consequence in her entire life. My mother sat in the front row, her chin held high, positively radiating a queenly satisfaction. I stared at the back of her perfectly coiffed head and thought about her email, the one where she joked about my savings being used for something fun. My fingers tightened around the folder in my lap. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted into polite applause. I clapped too, a slow, deliberate motion. But I wasn't celebrating their union. I was marking the final moments before their carefully constructed world came crashing down. At the reception, the atmosphere was thick with forced merriment. The music was loud, the food was extravagant, and the champagne was flowing. My mother glided around the room, accepting compliments on how spectacular everything was. The gracious host of a party paid for with stolen dreams. She didn't see me at first, tucked away at a table near the edge of the room with Nathan and my dad. "You don't have to do this," Nathan murmured, his hand resting on my back. "Yes," I said quietly, watching my mother laugh with a distant cousin. "I do." After the main course, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers, asking everyone to quiet down for the speeches. Kayla and Justin took their seats at the head table, flanked by my mother and the bridal party. The best man gave a speech full of stale jokes. The maid of honor cried. There was laughter and the clinking of glasses. Then the DJ announced, "If anyone else would like to share a few words or a toast for the happy couple, now is the time." I stood up. A subtle shift went through the room. Conversations nearest to me faltered. A ripple of whispers spread. I walked toward the center of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my steps were steady and sure. "I'd like to say something," I said, my voice carrying across the sudden quiet. I took the microphone from the DJ, who seemed to sense the impending drama, and gave me a curious smirk. My mother's smile froze on her face the moment she saw me. "Madison," she hissed through a clenched jaw, "this is not the time or the place." "Actually," I replied, my voice calm and clear into the microphone, "I think this is the perfect time. You see, everyone here tonight has been complimenting this beautiful wedding, talking about how wonderfully generous my mother was to make it all happen. I just think you all deserve to know exactly how she paid for it." A dead hush fell over the 100 or so guests. I could feel every eye in the room on me. Kayla shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting toward our mother. Justin's pleasant expression tightened into a knot. "Madison, stop it!" my mother snapped, her voice low but dripping with venom. "Don't you dare ruin your sister's special day." I opened my folder and pulled out the first page, a bank statement enlarged and printed so the numbers were impossible to miss. 17 years ago, I began. I opened a savings account in my name and my mother's. It was meant to protect the money I was saving for my daughter Ava's college education. Every overtime shift I worked, every holiday bonus, every single spare dollar went into this account. I walked slowly as I spoke, letting the pages catch the light as I flipped through them. Just last month, that account had a balance of $212,000. And then there was one transaction, a full withdrawal processed by my mother, Brenda. I held the paper out, pointing it toward her. Gasps echoed through the room. My mother's face had gone ashen, but she tried to rally. "This is a private family matter," she spat. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, my voice soft but amplified by the microphone. "You're embarrassed because I'm telling the truth in front of all the people you were trying so hard to impress." I held up the next page, an invoice from the venue, marked "Paid in full." The timeline is very clear. The day after the withdrawal, a payment was wired to this venue, and to the florist, and to the caterer. I held up the final, most damning piece of paper, the printed email. I read it aloud, my voice ringing with a cold fury. "Don't you worry about the cost, darling. Your sister's college stash is finally being put to good use for something fun. Those were your words, Mom." The room erupted. Someone in the back audibly gasped, "Oh my God." Justin, the groom, slowly stood up, his eyes locked on the paper in my hand. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief, directing the question to Brenda. "Did you use your own granddaughter's college fund to pay for our wedding?" My mother's carefully constructed mask finally shattered. "I did what was necessary for this family," she shrieked, her voice shrill. "Madison would have just wasted it on some expensive out-of-state school. Ava can get student loans. This wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event." Near the back of the room, Ava, who had been standing quietly beside Nathan, made a small, wounded sound that tore through my heart. "You didn't even invite us," I said, my voice shaking now, not with fear, but with pure, righteous fury. You stole my daughter's future. You spent it on a party we weren't even welcome at, and you laughed about it. I turned from her and addressed the stunned room. So you should all know. The generosity you've been celebrating tonight was paid for by a 17-year-old girl's education and a single mother's life of sacrifice. Justin looked physically ill. "Brenda," he said, his voice dangerously low, "did you tell me this money was from a family inheritance?" She tried to brush it off. "It's all family money. What difference does it make where it came from? It makes all the difference in the world if it was stolen," he shot back. That word stolen hung in the air like a final verdict. That was when my dad stepped forward, his body trembling but his voice surprisingly clear. "Madison is telling the truth," he said, looking at the guests around him. "That account was for Ava's college. Brenda knew it. We all knew it." The entire dynamic of the room shifted. The stares directed at my mother were no longer just curious. They were laced with judgment and disgust. Kayla's face had crumpled, and she was openly sobbing. "Mom, is that why you told me not to invite her? So she wouldn't find out?" My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in her life, she looked truly cornered, fragile and small. "I did what I had to do," she whispered. "I'm the only one who ever thinks about this family." "No," I said, letting the final paper, a copy of the preliminary legal complaint Ms. Rodriguez had drafted, fall onto the table in front of her. "You're the only one who thinks your wants are more important than anyone else's future." I looked at Ava, at Nathan, at my dad, and then back at the silent, watching guests. "I will be pursuing this legally," I announced. "I will not let her bury this with guilt trips and family drama. And I will not let my daughter pay the price for my mother's greed." I handed the microphone back to the stunned DJ. For a heartbeat, the room was completely frozen. Then it fractured. Voices rose, chairs scraped against the floor. Kayla was crying hysterically, and Justin was shouting quietly and furiously at my mother. The fairy light still twinkled, but the beautiful illusion was gone, shattered into a million pieces. If you were in that room, would you have sided with the woman who paid for your champagne or the one who paid with her child's future? I walked out of that reception hall and into the cool night air, my hands still shaking as the adrenaline began to drain from my body. Nathan was right behind me, wrapping a strong arm around my shoulders. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice full of awe. "You didn't raise your voice, you didn't break down. You just presented the facts." Behind us, the chaos was escalating. I could hear raised voices, the sound of hurried footsteps, and someone crying loudly. It sounded like Kayla. I didn't look back. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the suffocating knot in my chest started to unravel. A moment later, Ava reached us. Her eyes were red from unshed tears, but her face looked lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. "You did all that for me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I did it for both of us," I replied, pulling her into a hug. "But yeah, mostly for you." She hugged me back, clinging to me with a strength that surprised me. "Even if we don't get a single dollar of that money back," she whispered into my shoulder, "I'm so glad everyone finally knows who she really is." The days that followed were a whirlwind of fallout. My mother left me a single voicemail, a rambling, venomous tirade in which I was ungrateful, cruel, and dramatic for humiliating her in public. She insisted she had only ever tried to help, and that good families don't drag each other through the courts. I saved it. Ms. Rodriguez smiled when I played it for her. "This clearly establishes her mindset," she noted. "She still feels entirely entitled to your sacrifices. Judges tend to dislike entitlement, especially when it harms a child. Justin, Kayla's new husband, called to offer a sincere apology." "I had no idea, Madison," he said, and I could hear the genuine shame in his voice. "Brenda told me she'd been saving for years for both her daughters, and that you had agreed the money could go toward the wedding. If I had known the truth, I never would have allowed it." I believed him. mostly because he had spent the rest of his wedding reception looking like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. "So what happens now?" I asked. "The wedding is over. The money is spent." "Not all of it," he said, surprising me. "Some of the final vendor payments are still pending, and if your lawsuit goes forward, well, Brenda might not be the only one facing questions about financial misrepresentation." There it was again, the implication that this could become something far more serious for my mother. A few weeks later, the lawsuit was officially filed, Madison versus Brenda, seeking full restitution of the $212,000 plus damages. When the notice of legal action arrived at my mother's house, the extended family text chains exploded. Roughly half of them immediately sided with her, parroting her lines about airing dirty laundry in public and showing disrespect. The other half, however, went silent publicly, but sent me private messages of support. She took a chunk of my college money, too. Back in the day, one cousin confessed. Just not nearly as much. Another wrote, "She has always played favorites. I'm just glad someone finally held her accountable. My dad ended up moving out, staying with a friend. She says, 'I betrayed her by not stopping you,' he told me over the phone, his voice weary. But I've spent 30 years watching her hurt people. And call it love. I'm just tired, Madison. I didn't know what would become of their marriage. But for the first time, I felt my dad might finally choose his own peace over his proximity to her chaos." The court-ordered mediation was incredibly tense. My mother arrived dressed in a modest, expensive-looking suit, her hair perfect, her expression icy. She looked smaller, though, as if some of the hot air had been let out of her ego since the wedding. Her first move was to offer a partial settlement. "I'll return some of the money over time," she said, trying to frame it as a simple misunderstanding. "We can work out an interest-free payment plan. There's no need to drag this through the courts." Ms. Rodriguez's voice was like velvet-wrapped steel. "Full restitution," she replied without blinking, "plus compensation for the lost time and emotional distress inflicted upon your granddaughter. Your client did not borrow this money. She stole it and spent it." My mother kept darting glances at me, clearly expecting me to fold, to soften, to be the peacemaker I had always been. I just met her gaze and held it, my face a blank mask. I said nothing. Finally, when the mediator stepped out of the room for a moment, she leaned across the table and whispered, "Are you really willing to destroy your own mother over money?" I looked her right in the eye. "You were willing to destroy my daughter's future over a party," I said. "This was never about the money. It's about consequences." In the end, faced with our mountain of documentation and the very real threat of a public trial in front of a judge who would be far less patient than a mediator, she caved. The settlement was brutal. It required her to liquidate a number of assets, take out a significant personal loan, and dramatically downsize her lifestyle. The house she had lorded over the family for decades went up for sale. Her designer accessories vanished. She cried to anyone who would listen about her ungrateful daughter who had forced her into financial ruin. But behind the scenes, she paid. Each payment was wired directly into a newly established trust account, in my name only, with Ava as the sole beneficiary. This time, there were no joint signatures, no loopholes, no room for misunderstandings. The first time I logged into that new account and saw the balance begin to climb back up, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months: hope. It would take time, careful planning, and smart investments, but Ava's dream was back on the table. When I told her the case was settled, she stared at me for a long moment. "So she has to sell the house? The one she was always so proud of?" I nodded. "Actions have consequences," I said simply, "even for grandmas." Ava was quiet for a second, then said softly, "I don't feel sorry for her. Is that a bad thing?" I shook my head, a real smile finally reaching my eyes. "No, sweetie, that's an honest thing." Months later, I was standing on the sprawling green lawn of Ava's future college campus during an orientation visit. I watched as she turned in a slow circle, her eyes wide as she took in the stately brick buildings, the bustling energy of the students, the sheer possibility that hung in the autumn air. "We're really here," she breathed, a look of wonder on her face. "After everything, I'm actually here." I squeezed her hand tightly. "You are," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "because you earned this, and because this time we didn't let anyone else decide what you are worth." My relationship with my mother never recovered. We are low contact, exchanging polite, sterile text messages on birthdays and holidays. She still tells her version of the story, where I'm the villain who took her to court over a simple misunderstanding. But the people who matter know the truth. And more importantly, so do I. I used to think being a good daughter meant I had to absorb pain and call it love. It meant forgiving without accountability and sacrificing my own needs until there was nothing left of me. Now I know that being a good mother meant I had to stand up to my own to protect my child. It was messy. It was painful. People judged me. But it was the right thing to do. If your parents showed you, time and time again, that their comfort was more important than your future, would you keep forgiving them? Or would you finally teach them what consequences feel like? End of story.